Glazer. I am the Senior Manager.
This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you, Kate. Kate's behind the scenes making all of this flows just seamlessly. So thank you so much, Kate. My name is Kristen Glazer, and I'm the Senior Manager of Donor Relations here at the Greater Cleveland Food Bank. And I am thrilled today to be with two wonderful friends and colleagues, Kimmy LoVano as well as Noel Rivera. They are on our advocacy team, and I'm really excited to highlight them and talk to them today because so many folks have no idea or don't even realize that the food bank actually has an advocacy team and that we are doing even more than just providing healthy, nutritious food to our community. So I'm very excited for us to just learn a little bit more about what the advocacy team looks like, as well as something that they've been up to, as well as the foreseeable future. We also have folks that are, this is our very first one where it's a hybrid meeting. And so we have a few folks that are over in the community room as well. If anyone has any questions throughout the process, if you're online, please feel free to just type it into the Zoom and we will get to those questions at the end. And then if you're in person, you should have a couple pieces of paper and pens in front of you. Feel free to just write down your question, and Carrie and Ben are in the meeting space with you as well, and they will be sure to get it and get those questions over to us as well. But the more questions, the merrier, so we definitely encourage them. Kimmy LoVano is our Director of Advocacy, and she has been with us for nearly 10 years at the food bank. She is a proud alum of The Ohio State University, as is my husband, who would be very happy that I added the in front of it, so go Bucks. She spent her entire career here in the advocacy department. And then we also have Noel Rivera joining us as well on her team. And Noel has been in several different departments at the food bank. He is coming up on almost 15 years, so a decade and a half at the food bank. And if you've ever been on a tour or you are coming on a tour, I will tell you that Noel literally wrote this tour script. So Noel knows everything about everything, and just so excited to have him on here as well. I'll pause there. Kimmy, Noel, anything in addition that you want to share?
No, I'm really excited to be here today and get to talk about some of our advocacy work and hear all of the questions that folks may have about the importance of advocacy and the work that we're doing and the importance of food banks.
Same for me. Definitely excited to be here and, get to engage with donors in our advocacy work. So.
Very good. Well, thank you guys so much. You're always so generous with your time on top of everything else that you guys are doing. So we really appreciate it. Well, if we can just start, Kimmy, would you maybe, just because you grew up in the advocacy department, would you maybe just want to share a little bit about the advocacy department's history and a little bit of an overview about it for those of us that may not know?
Sure. So our advocacy work, Noel and I always talk about this as it's kind of broken into two areas. So our job is to raise awareness on the issue of food insecurity, on all of the issues that those who turn to emergency feeding programs, all of the issues that they're facing. So our job is a lot of community awareness raising. And in doing so, we try to mobilize people around the issue of hunger. So what can you do to get involved? Who can you reach out to at the state level, the local level, the federal level to make sure that hunger remains a priority? That is a really big piece of our job. It's not always easy because, as you can imagine, there are so many pressing issues at any given time at the state, the federal, the local levels, and some really worthy issues. So it can be tough to make sure that hunger remains a priority. We've had that challenge for a long time now, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, I'm sure, during our time together today. But awareness raising is a big part of our work. The other big part of our work is around lobbying. So I do a lot of work at the state level. I'm a registered lobbyist with the state of Ohio because we do so much work around our state food programs. So at the food bank, we receive food through a number of programs. We operate food programs through the federal government. We get food from the state of Ohio, food that would otherwise just be plowed under or end up in a landfill because it's misshapen. It doesn't look as nice as some of the food that you find in the grocery store, but it's just as nutritious. The only difference is there might be a scratch on it. that food comes to the food bank, but that is only made possible because of our state legislators who make sure to put money in the budget so that food banks can get that. But Noel and I, a lot of our advocacy work is around making sure that they understand that that's a priority, going down to Columbus, making visits, making a lot of phone calls on a regular basis to our elected officials. And the same goes for all of our elected officials in Washington, D.C. We do a lot of phone calls to make sure that they understand why this is so important. Now, our advocacy work has been here for longer than I've been here. So for at least about 15 years, the food bank has had an advocacy department that has prioritized government advocacy work to make sure that we get all of the food and all of the resources that we need to continue meeting the demand. And I will say one thing that I think is really important to know is that our advocacy department and our SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, those were kind of in the same department for a number of years. Our SNAP outreach work, which SNAP is such a critical part of the hunger, the safety net. And those two departments being in one, I think just speaks to the importance of the SNAP program and the fact that SNAP provides 9 meals for every 1 meal provided by food banks. So that's something I always like to point out to people who aren't as familiar with kind of the advocacy side of our work, just how important SNAP is to making sure that people are able to get all of the food that they need to stay healthy.
And Kimmy, every time I hear that fact, it just astounds me. So for every 1 meal that the Greater Cleveland Food Bank provides, SNAP actually provides 9 meals. That's just incredible. And obviously both programs are just so important of all the work that's being done at the food bank as well as in tandem with these just critical programs. Noel, is there anything that you want to add on to that from the advocacy department in regards to just the advocacy department?
I guess just to kind of add on to the history piece of it, when I started here, it was one person in advocacy. And to Kimmy's point, this was probably late 2000s. That department had been around for a year or two at that point. So that's how, we're not quite new to this work anymore. I think we can confidently say that, but, to watch it grow over the years was pretty remarkable. Our outreach team that Kimmy mentioned started off as like 1 or 2 people, and now they might be the second largest department in the food bank. So just to have a sense of that growth, I think it's really remarkable.
That's a great point too. Is for some folks that have been with us for a little while, you may know that the food bank just recently celebrated our 40th anniversary a few years ago. But I think it's a great point that you bring up both the advocacy team as well as the health center are 2 teams that they've been around for, going on, a decade and a half, 2 decades, but not that long really. But the growth that we've seen and the incredible difference that you all have been able to help make for our community. It's really gone from just, serving food to serving nutritious food to really helping to get to the root causes of hunger. Because we all know that hunger is not an isolated issue. I always kind of describe it as a Venn diagram. If someone's hungry, the hunger is not the only circle that's up there of that Venn diagram, but housing, healthcare, and employment/income are the 3 root causes of hunger. So if we can really fix those areas, that is what truly is going to end up indirectly solving hunger or directly solving hunger. As well as, again, all the important work, especially on the advocacy team of just making sure that those legislators know and understand the incredible difference that these policies make for our community. Well, very good. Well, thank you so much, Kimmy, for just Kimmy and Noel for just giving a really quick overview and maybe taking it a little bit further. So fast forwarding to where we are now compared to 15 years ago. So we've been in a pandemic the past couple of years. What does the landscape right now kind of look like for the advocacy team?
So just with the pandemic, over the past 2 years, I think food banks received a good amount of federal and state support because our elected officials understood that this was hopefully a once in a lifetime pandemic. We were in a spot where people were unemployed, missing hours at work, dealing with issues around, if I have a toddler at home, there's a lot of times where your kid is sick, can't go to school, maybe you're isolated at home. And people just are living paycheck to paycheck. And if you're missing a paycheck for one reason or another, we saw a lot of people come to our food lines looking for help. So Congress gave food banks quite a bit of resources to help meet the demand during the pandemic. But something that a lot of folks don't realize is that a lot of those pandemic supports have ended or are going to be ending. And I know we'll talk about that quite a bit during our time together. But one of the really big supports that has ended was additional support that we received through, it's called TFAP, the Emergency Food Assistance Program. I don't like to say that over and over again, nor does anyone at the food bank, so we just call it TFAP. We also call it USDA food. So it's food that comes from the US Department of Agriculture. Essentially what happens is that the USDA will purchase food from farmers across the country. That food is purchased for one of two reasons. One is either supply or demand. Now, what I mean by that, demand food means that a certain community will receive additional food from American farmers based on how many people in that community live in poverty, what unemployment looks like. And it just so happens that the city of Cleveland is the poorest large city in the country. So we receive a lot of additional food through the Emergency Food Assistance Program, or TFAP, because we have such a high poverty rate here in the city. But then we also receive food based on supply. So the agricultural market, when there's ups and downs, we receive additional food. A good example of that is a number of years ago, there was a big surplus of catfish. So we received a lot of catfish, we received a lot of blueberries. That's food that it's not like your normal food that you set out to purchase when you go to the grocery store. It might be those add-on items that you see as you're walking through. And it totally depends on the market. One year, again, we might get catfish and blueberries. The next year, we might get beef. The next year, we might get raspberries or banana. It just completely varies. Now, the items that we typically get that are budgeted for by Congress are some of those essential items. So through TFAP, we get things like oatmeal and frozen or canned fruit goods. We get juices, those items that are really great for a family that's trying to stretch their resources through the month. Now, during the pandemic, what Congress did is they gave food banks additional dollars to get food from American farmers, to bring that food in and distribute it to all of the people that were in need. But all of that additional funding has dried up. So what we're seeing now with the food bank between December of 2021 and January of 2022, and all of this year so far, we're seeing a drop of almost 70% in the amount of food that we get through this program. Now, for context, in December, we got 1.2 million pounds of food through that program. By January, we only received about 400,000 pounds. So that is a huge, huge drop off. And what that means is that we have to purchase significantly more food to make up for the fact that all of that food that was coming, it's some of the most nutritious food that we give out, and it has dried up so much. So our food purchasing team is going out and purchasing more and more food. But as you can imagine, and I know Noel and I talk about this a lot, so he'll probably have something to add to this, the cost of food has increased. So instead of going out and buying food for what we were before the pandemic, we're seeing food cost increases by about 25% across the board, but as much as 40 to 45%, like items for like peanut butter is one of the items that we've seen just a drastic increase in cost for. And that means that our dollars just don't stretch as far when we go out to purchase food. And we're purchasing about 2.5 times as much food as we did before the pandemic. And that number keeps going up. I suspect this year we'll purchase even more than 2.5 times as much food as we did in 2019. But I think the increase in food costs are hitting us really hard. And it's honestly hitting everyone in our community really hard, which means we're seeing more folks coming into our lines. Noel, I know you and I always talk about rising food costs and inflation and what that impact has been in our community. Do you want to share anything else on that? Anything I didn't touch on?
Yeah, definitely. I think just relating to our struggles as a food bank, I was just thinking, that drop in TFAP that you were just talking about, what that looks like for us on a partner level is our partner agencies, they have less access to that food on the shopping list. So it's almost like maybe the domino effect. So we have to purchase more because we have less government funded food. That trickles down to our partner agencies. They're going to have to, they have less free food to access. So that means they're going to have to purchase the purchase food that we put on the shopping list. So just wanted to point that out, just how, we're the nonprofit food distribution center, and the sort of pains that we're going through with this pandemic, that's felt at the partner level as well. So just really wanted to point that out. And as far as the need out there, I think one thing that stuck with me, throughout this pandemic, and maybe towards the end of last year, where we start looking more towards recovery, this idea of a K-shaped recovery, where the middle or upper classes, they're sitting on a lot of savings. They're doing pretty much fine, even with this inflation. The folks who feel it the most is at the bottom end, lower income, lower wage earners. They didn't have a pile of savings that they were sitting on. If anything, the federal supports, like the expanded child tax credit, they were relying on things like that, stimulus checks, but those are all gone, as Kimmy had noted. So, they're making those tough choices now, maybe more so than other Americans are. And these are the people that, from week to week, maybe they have to decide, okay, maybe I'll go to the Muni Lot this week, or, I'm doing okay this week, so I don't have to worry about it. So those are just choices that people are faced with now. The rising food costs, I think, we're at least 25% of what we were purchasing, or as far as the cost that we're spending compared to pre-pandemic. So 25% more. And with regard to that too, I think it's worth pointing out that the supply chain issues, that's not going away anytime soon. I've heard recently, as far as food costs, stabilizing, we're not going to see that until next year. So these are things that are just going to continue to happen, unfortunately. Cost of fleet, that's up for us too. Freight, or rather, I should say. And one thing we've discussed before, as a food bank, our, almost like call it our business model, we're meant to rely on donations and government funded food. We were never really meant to be purchasing as much as we are. So that kind of flips the model on its head. And we're finding more and more, how sustainable is this? It's challenging. We're finding that, I think, from month to month, and just looking ahead into even, next year when we're in our new building. So just wanted to add that.
Yeah.
Thanks,
And
Noel.
actually,
And go ahead, Kimmy.
I'll just add on to Noel what you said. Something that I've heard mentioned a few times that has really stuck with me. As Noel mentioned, we've historically relied on food donations from grocery stores, from our food manufacturers. And a lot of that food is, let's say there's a brand error or a marketing error on boxes of food that are going out from a company like Kraft or Nestle. A lot of that food comes to the food bank because the product inside the box, it's the exact same as the product that you get at the grocery store, but there's a marketing error. And as probably everyone on this call knows, brand awareness is everything. So they can't sell it at the store, but they can donate it. And the food is fantastic, tastes just as good. But we're not getting as much of those types of donations anymore. And when you go to the grocery store and you see that shelves are empty, that means that food banks certainly are not receiving as much in donated food. Because if that food is not left over at the grocery store, my first job was at Giant Eagle. And at the end of the day, when there was extra food, if the food was at the Best By date, we would go get ready for that food to be donated to the food bank. But now, since those shelves are bare, there's nothing for people to pull to donate to the food bank. So we're in a really tricky position and something historically that honestly we have never seen before, where we're not receiving as much federal food. and we're not receiving as much donated food. So it puts us in a spot where we're just purchasing an incredible amount of food. And for us, since we purchased millions of pounds, last year it translated to 6 million additional pounds of food purchased. And we'll purchase even more than that this year, which is, it's just not something that we could sustain in the long run, because healthy food is expensive, as we all know.
So we're purchasing significantly more food during a time of significant inflation. So not only are we purchasing more food, but we're also seeing rising food costs of 25 to 45% as well. Gotcha. Noel, I want to go back to something that you had said and lean on a little bit of your past life when you were over in agent program and agency services. Can you kind of explain what that model looks like for those that may not know in regards to the free food from the food bank versus partner agencies and kind of the purchase model and what that looks like?
Sure. You know, ideally, it's set up to, because these are all our partners are nonprofits. You know, a lot of them are volunteer based, volunteer driven. So we try to keep the cost down as much as possible for them. So the way our shopping list is set up, ideally, they're going for the free, you know, government funded product first. And then what's not available at the time is, you know, as Kimmy was saying, depending on like supply and demand cycles, say peanut butter is not available at, you know, from the USDA at no cost. That's when our purchase product would kick in, and they would have to spend a little bit more because we do have to, you know, basically it's like a wholesale cost to them. We get it at wholesale cost, we make it available to them at wholesale cost. So they'll spend a little bit more, but that's not routine. You know, ideally they're trying to purchase, or they're trying to select as much of the free product as possible. That's been the sustainable model pretty much ever since I've been here. I can say there have been cycles where there's been less USDA product available, and agencies feel that directly. And then, you know, different things change. Like not that long ago, the trade war with China, that provided a lot of extra USDA product that, you know, unfortunately as a partner agency, you get really used to that. And then as soon as it goes away, it's like, it's, you know, you can't but not notice it. So yeah, that's generally how they operate. And again, you know, each pantry, for instance, they're tasked with providing at least 3 days worth of food per visit for the clients out there. And, you know, if you think about it, the challenge of making those, you know, balanced meals, when you have a nice variety coming in from USDA, you know, that's a good challenge to have. But then when you kind of decrease the variety and maybe even the quality of the food that they're used to, that's, you know, that's tricky for anybody. Even, you know, if you think of your own household, you know, when your options get sort of limited suddenly, definitely a challenge.
So much of what you're saying is reminding me, last night I was able to volunteer at one of our hot meal sites over in Lakewood. And our pantries, our partners are just such savvy spenders. So they had just received a $300 grant from the food bank that they're able to use towards purchasing food through. So anyone that supported Harvest for Hunger, those are your Harvest for Hunger dollars at work, where it's comes to the food, those dollars come to the food bank, and then we are then giving grants to the partner agencies for them to use. And I was talking, her name was Pam, who is a volunteer coordinator there. She's retired and she really enjoys it. But she was saying that typically what they do is exactly what you said, Noel. They will go online to the shopping portal and they will look at all of the free food and they will go for that first. And they may be making sloppy joes one month, or they may be making spaghetti the next month. It just kind of depends on what's available. But because of this grant, what she was able to do, they serve on the fourth Tuesday of every month, they have a hot meal for the community, and they serve about 80 people every month. And because they received this grant, the way that she did it is she's purchasing protein. So I think they have turkey, chicken, and I forget what the third one is, but they're planning on doing turkey in May, chicken in June, and I forget what July is, but it's another good, healthy protein. but she took that $300, was able to essentially purchase 240 proteins for the next 3 months, because she said it's a lot more economical, and I can typically find more of like the carrots or things like corn and things like that for me to cover the sides with the free food. So let me use this $300 grant to cover the cost of the protein for the next 3 months. And they're set for the next 3 months. She said maybe they'll spend about $27 a month to get those meals out. And she said most of that typically is because of COVID, they are more they're in the to-go containers now, as opposed to pre-COVID. They actually had glassware that they used, but because they have to purchase the to-go containers, it's a little bit more than what it used to be. But they are such savvy shoppers. And again, that's just, your Harvest for Hunger dollars at work. That's also just, I've been to so many of our pantries and have heard so many similar stories of how they are truly stretching their funds as far as possible. So thanks, Noel, for just sharing it. And again, I had a really fun time last night. So also just kind of happy to share about that as well.
Real quick on that savviness, so many of our partners, they're long timers. They are long timers. They've been, they know all the tricks. So shout out to them.
Absolutely. And I mean, the food bank, we are so diligent with our dollars, and we also then see that with our partner agencies as well. They also were really proud to show me they received, during COVID, we were not only providing grants for food, but we were also opened up the opportunity for folks to submit applications for equipment or anything to help expand their operations. And they were really excited to show we were able to give them a brand new, very large commercial, and basically industrial freezer for them as well, to help with their cooling freezing needs, as well as new racking for them. So, and that was something that they had received in 2021 through and because of the pandemic, but again, because of donor dollars that we had available, again, is we're trying to expand our partners' reach as well. But yeah, no, they're very savvy, and they were very excited about it too. So it was just great to see, and just the pride and joy. Every person that I met with, except for one person, were all volunteers, and they run on a part-time staff, and just, they just really enjoy what they do. And then of course the community members that I had a chance to sit down and talk with too were just, it really meant a lot to them. And that they look forward to that fourth Tuesday every month for that meal, not just a meal, but also that community, and kind of seeing very friendly faces and all of those things. So, but anyways, I'm so sorry to go off on a little bit of a tangent. Kimmy, anything else that you wanted to add to kind of that topic, or should we move on to what the future kind of looks like?
No, the only thing I would add, Noel referenced the Muni Lot, which for anyone who's not aware, we've been doing a food distribution out of the City of Cleveland's Municipal Lot, the Muni Lot, or old tailgating hangout. Every single Thursday since the pandemic started. We've done more than 100 of those distributions, which is hard to fully comprehend. But something that I have found really tough to swallow is that we're actually seeing more people turn to the Muni Lot now than we did the summer when the pandemic started. So we're seeing an average of about 2,300 households visiting the Muni Lot to get food every single Thursday. That's every single week we see 2,300 households turn to the Muni Lot for help with food. And to me, that's just really, really hard to swallow, because a lot of the pandemic benefits have expired, but there's more that are set to expire. So we're just trying to plan ahead for what's going to happen when those benefits expire. And honestly, it's only a matter of time before our lines get even longer.
Yeah, I know that we have some folks in attendance that are in public health, but really it's a public health emergency, and that's triggering some benefit cuts potentially. Can you go into a little bit of what that actually means and what that looks like?
Sure. So since the pandemic started, we've been in a public health emergency that was declared by the federal government, that was declared by the state of Ohio. And the public health emergency just allowed the state and the federal government to offer a number of flexibilities so that we could make sure that we could get food out, so that additional benefits could go out to people who are having a tough time making ends meet. One of the most critical benefits that's been going out since the pandemic started is through the SNAP program. So typically during non-pandemic times, a household will receive SNAP benefits based on their income. So for example, the lower your income, the more you receive in SNAP, because it assumes that if you have a lower income, you need additional dollars to help purchase groceries. So about 87% of households receiving SNAP are households with children, folks who are disabled, or folks who are over the age of 65. So a lot of folks have lower incomes. Obviously, if you're receiving food through the SNAP program, your income has to be below 130% of the federal poverty line. So during the public health emergency, what the federal government did is they pushed everyone up to a higher benefit amount, just taking into account the fact that so many people were dealing with issues around unemployment, lost hours at work, et cetera. A lot of schools, as we all know, were closed, kids coming in and out because of COVID cases or being isolated at home and quarantined for long periods of time. So SNAP went up. Now, as soon as the public health emergency ends, families will no longer be receiving this additional SNAP benefit. Now, what that translates to, we're expecting the public health emergency to end in July. That is what the federal government is kind of pointing to. And when that public health emergency ends in August, we will see the last additional benefit. So by September, the average person will lose $80 per month in SNAP benefits. The biggest impact and what is worrying a lot of us the most is the impact on older adults. So seniors, even though a lot of older adults have lower incomes, they typically have the lowest benefit. So some seniors only receive $20 a month in SNAP, and they've been receiving more than $200 a month since the pandemic started. As soon as that public health emergency goes into effect, a lot of senior households who are single or married in a senior household will go from about $200 a month to $20 a month, which with rising food costs, that can buy you like 3 apples at this point. So it's a really heartbreaking thing to keep in mind. For families with kids, I was actually just looking at it this morning. A single parent with 2 kids at home will lose an average of about $300 a month. So I cannot imagine what that impact will be, especially on families with kids. Trying to already stretch a budget to feed 2 kids at home is tough, but having to cut lunches or dinners for your kids because your benefits go down is something I can only imagine. So, I mean, at the food bank, we're trying to prepare for that. We're doing a lot of advocacy work around that benefit expiring. We're doing a lot of advocacy to get additional federal food in our doors, additional state food in our doors, so that we're prepared for when that time comes. Our leadership team is paying really close attention to this. We're prepared for September to be a month where we see a lot more families. And something that's also really tough is that people don't know this is going to happen. So SNAP benefits come through the state and through the county, and people have not yet been told that their benefits will be drastically cut. So there's going to be a lot of confusion for folks who go to the grocery store. They go to use their SNAP card, and for folks who aren't aware of the way that the SNAP program works, it's just like a debit card. When you go to the grocery store, you insert it the same way you insert your debit card if you're paying with a normal bank debit card. You'll insert your SNAP card, and it will automatically deduct eligible food items. So what we expect to happen in September is that folks will go to use the benefit amount that they are used to receiving. So if someone's used to receiving about $200 and they go and they insert their card, it will only cover about $20 if their benefit is cut back to 20, and they will be left wondering what happened to the remaining $180 I've been receiving over the past couple of years. So the food bank is working really hard. We're planning to do kind of a media campaign since that information hasn't gone out yet, but we're really concerned. That is one of those items that kind of keeps us up at night. It keeps me up at night.
Yeah. So you're telling me I'm a mom, which I am, of 2 young kids, and I've been used to receiving, a certain amount of a budget, just like our partners are very savvy, like we talked about before. The folks that we serve are also very savvy in their budgeting. So I'm used to receiving 200. I have my cart in line, and that's how I'm going to find out is when the cashier tells me.
Yes. Yeah. And just for some context of how big this loss will be, we did some rough math to kind of calculate what the impact will be in Cuyahoga County. And we're looking at a loss of about 54 million meals every year. 54 million meals. So I would say from September to September, that is how many meals we'll lose. And just for context, the food bank last year provided, I believe, 52 million meals. So we're looking at a significant loss of nutritious food in our community. And it's food that people can go to the grocery store and pick out the food that works best for their family, which is so important, especially for folks with diet-related illness like diabetes, especially for folks who have kids at home with food allergies or special dietary restrictions. It's so important to be able to go to the store and pick out the food that works best for your family. And we're going to see a loss of 54 million meals. So that anytime there's a change to the SNAP program, we feel that here, because if folks go to the grocery store and their money doesn't stretch as far, they end up going to a food pantry or a partner program of ours to get help in the meantime. But we've never seen anything like this before. In the past, when we've seen a change of about 15% in benefits, we'll see our lines increase. But this is beyond drastic. An $80 cut per person per month will mean very, very long lines at our programs.
Yeah. So September, right when school's starting again, when all those additional expenses that come in for parents to be making of new book bags, new shoes, new school supplies, all of those things is also when this is going to happen, with the holidays shortly behind it. Noel, that kind of segues a little bit, because we've heard some things about the school feeding waivers. Can you talk a little bit about the difference that's made for us during the pandemic, as well as what that kind of looks like for the future as well, and maybe explain a little bit about that program too?
Yeah, absolutely. So prior to the pandemic, two of our more successful kids programs are summer feeding and kids cafe. So during the school year, it's kids cafe. Kids have access to an after school meal through one of our partner sites. And then during the summer, when school's closed, a lot of those same sites will offer a summer lunch. And so pre-pandemic, that has to happen on site. So kids have to, come, so essentially congregate at those sites. There's a certain time frame that they have to, maybe it's a 2-hour window when they can receive those meals. A lot of just different restrictions coming pretty much from USDA regarding that. So obviously with the pandemic, schools closing, businesses closing, it's just less, or, plus also a highly contagious disease. Congregate settings were just not ideal. So USDA had the authority to extend what's called child nutrition waivers. So essentially, for sites like us, for instance, we're able to adapt the grab and go model. So instead of kids having to meet somewhere, eat during a certain time frame, we set up different locations where our food truck can go and drop off meals to either parents or caregivers or the kids themselves. We'd be there, a set schedule, during the week, during the month. And essentially that just increased access to those nutritious meals that kids weren't getting at school or at after school program. So that's been in place pretty much since early pandemic. That is set to end. I believe it's with the public health emergency. So, about July or so. And essentially, if you can imagine going back to a model that just reached so many more children and then going, it's almost like going backwards. So now you're going to restrict that access for so many children. One big key to that too was area eligibility. So there's, before the pandemic, a certain percentage had to qualify for the free school lunches to be able, so that way, like the entire school district would just have area, or the entire district would be eligible. So Cleveland, for instance, is one of those districts. You have different, other school districts that they might be right there at the, at that percentage, but because of these waivers, everybody qualified for the free lunches. I know my nieces go to Twinsburg, and they would tell me last summer that they had access to free lunch, and I said, wow, that's amazing. Like, I wish I had that when I was a kid, right? But that's going to get rolled back, for instance, when this public health emergency ends. That's just going to create so many challenges for us. And we have the numbers. I don't necessarily have them in front of me, but like our backpack program, we've reached so many more kids through that program by operating fewer sites. And that's because of those flexibilities being in place. I think with those fewer sites, we're looking at, a decrease in over 80,000 meals because, again, those kids won't have access to those sites. As far as, going from a model where it's grab and go to, on-site congregate, these are partner sites like libraries, community centers, they're going to need extra staffing for that they probably didn't have to worry about for these past 2 years. Staffing's an issue all around, and I think that's going to be a challenge on that front too. So that's potentially, we're looking at a loss of upwards of 10 or so partner sites that typically operate from summer to summer, but because of those staffing challenges, we may lose up to 10 or so. And we're looking at about 24,000 meals that won't get distributed just because of all these different changes with the waivers kind of going back to the way things were. And then, to me, that's, talk about a tough pill to swallow. You had something that worked well, provided so much access, and then you're just going to kind of roll that back suddenly. So just want to definitely touch on that.
Yeah. So just to make sure that I and we all understand it, right? So before, pre-pandemic, we worked with organizations like the libraries. I always love to talk about all the Cleveland Public Libraries, how we partner with them, as well as other libraries as well. But the kids would have to be there at a specific time, sit there and eat their entire meal during the entire time. And then what these waivers did, because of the pandemic, it was more grab and go style. And mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, uncle, aunts could go grab it for the children in their households, not just the one child that was sitting there, but if there were any brothers or sisters or anything as well. And so it's going to revert back to that child needs to be up there at the specific time.
And just so folks know, that has to do with the reimbursement piece. So for that meal to count towards reimbursement from the USDA, all those things have to happen, as far as like being there, eating the meal on site, so on and so forth. Another piece of the waivers is that actual reimbursement. Partner sites have been getting a high reimbursement rate because of the waivers in place, largely because guess what? Supply chain and food costs, guess who's affected by that too, is the school providers. So that increase in reimbursement, that's going to go away as well. So you're talking about a time where, with supply chain disruptions, schools are also facing challenges, just like we are, of, accessing food. And as far as like with any regular, the dietary restrictions that are on school meals or kids meals, what if one day or there's certain weeks you don't have access to apples as far as fresh fruit, so you're going to have to substitute it. Maybe it's probably going to cost more, just so on and so forth. But yeah, I just wanted to point out, it's going to be a ripple effect, I think, with these child waivers going away.
Yeah, and this is specifically for children. And I think you bring up a good point too, just in regards to, there's staffing shortages almost everywhere right now. And so the grab and go model is a lot easier to manage from a staffing perspective, as opposed to the sit down model for an extended period of time. the cleanup and everything that goes in with that as well. So that's also going to add on additional difficulties for the particular site as well. Kimmy, is there anything you want to add on to that? And I'll also put a plug in if anyone has any questions. I've seen a few great ones come through. So thank you to folks who have already sent in questions. But if anyone else has any other questions, we're just getting ready for the Q&A portion. But please feel free to send those through the Zoom chat. And if you're over in the community room, you can also just write your questions down and give those to Carrie or Ben, and they'll be sure to get those over as well. But Kimmy, anything that you want to add on to anything that Noel shared, or just anything at all?
No, I mean, I think something I constantly feel like the advocacy department is the bearer of bad or difficult news. Like every meeting that we're in, it's kind of just, I feel like we're sounding alarm bells, because it's really easy to kind of turn your brain off when you go home after work and not pay attention to what's going on. If you have a meal waiting for you at home. And so I think a lot of people are unaware, including pretty much my entire network of family and friends, that we're kind of sitting on the cusp of this perfect storm that's coming, that's going to really hurt families. And it, like for me, same with Kristen, I have a 3-year-old at home, and I cannot imagine what it must feel like to not know how you're going to feed your kid at the end of the day. And it's just hard to swallow, knowing that a lot of those parents with kids just don't know what's coming and aren't ready for it. So that is something that's really tough to swallow. And so I always feel like we're sounding the alarms, but we're sounding the alarms because it's, 54 million meals lost in a year is just really hard to fathom. But when you think about who's going to be losing those meals, it's a lot of little kids, it's a lot of older adults in our community, and it's hard to swallow.
And this is just something that it's not just here in Cleveland or Northeast Ohio. I mean, food banks across the nation are experiencing this. Food banks and communities across the nation.
Yeah, and we're certainly, I say this over and over again, that Cleveland is the best. The greater Cleveland community is so generous. People have really stepped up in a way that I've never seen before to help make sure that people have the food that they need. And we've seen some other areas, other food banks that just haven't had the same level of community support that we have had here in Cleveland. So we've been able to make sure that we're purchasing enough food to keep up with the demand. There's been some food banks I've heard recently, even in Ohio, that haven't had any food left on their shelves to give out. And that's really, really tough to hear. But I think it's definitely, Kristen, what you said. It's something that we're seeing across the country, and it's a really scary thought that we're heading into this over the summer months and right when we're going back to school.
Yeah. Well, we will try to bring it back up a little bit, Kimmy. I'm sorry. It's just such an important topic, and so just appreciate just everything that you guys do. I'm going to go over into a few questions that we have seen come through. And again, if you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat. If you are able to, one second. Great question. What is the best way to cut through the noise to reach politicians?
That's a really good question. It's interesting. Noel and I have had to go through a number of trainings on this. It's called citizen-led advocacy, so that we can cut through the noise. I think the biggest thing to remember is that I would say 98% of the elected officials that we talk to, they understand the issue and they support it. They support making sure that anti-hunger programs are fully supported. I think what can be tough, I know, and I mentioned this earlier, is getting through when there's so much going on in our world right now. It can be really difficult for elected officials to prioritize. They have a very set amount of money that they have to fund projects, to fund programs that help folks. So I think that is the biggest challenge. Honestly, what I have found is making sure that our elected officials are coming out to the food bank encouraging them to visit their local food bank is so important. Encouraging them to actually go out and talk to people at food pantries, at hot meals, at these kids programs, because once you see what's going on, and once you talk to people and understand the issue, I think that's when we really start to kind of like flip that switch in someone's brain to understand that there is a solution to this. We found ways to address these issues, like Noel mentioned, like the grab and go model. We found a really great way to make sure that kids get fed. And we're going back to the way things were before. And it's really hard to describe that to our elected officials unless they're out seeing that program, talking to those kids. So I think that's the best way, is when you're communicating with elected officials, encourage them to visit a food bank and encourage them to visit a local pantry. And if you can't do that, then share a story. Talk about why it matters to you. Make sure you're talking to elected officials that you're within their district. If they hear that you're a constituent and you're a voter, it gets through, because their job is to represent their constituency. As much as I would love to call every single elected official in Ohio and tell them my thoughts, the person who I get the most audience with is my very own Congresswoman Chantel Brown, because I live in her district. So her job is to represent me in Congress. Whereas, for example, Representative Bob Gibbs, his job is not to represent me in Congress because I don't live in Ashland. So I think just making sure that your elected official understands why this is important to you specifically as a voter in their district, I think that's really important.
And Kimmy, I remember you sharing a slide in regards to, whether it's a phone call, a letter, an email. Can you share a little bit about those kind of communication techniques?
Sure. So there's a group that does just a research study every single year to understand what is most impactful to members of Congress. The biggest kind of takeaway is that it's what's impactful to their legislative staff, because their legislative staff are the ones that are answering those emails, they're answering the phone when you call. And what's most important to them, the number one thing that you can do is visit. It's going either to DC to visit. If you're ever in the area, go down to DC and meet with your member. But the interesting part is that it's just as impactful to make a visit here, right in your district. So every single elected official in DC has a district office. All you have to do is Google. You can find where their district office is, and you can request a meeting whenever you want. So a meeting is the most impactful, but I think it's like the effectiveness rate is maybe 94% of offices would rate that as very impactful on swaying a decision. But just below that is writing a personalized letter or a personalized email. So as long as you're getting that personalized message across, the form emails and the form letters are impactful, and they're a lot more impactful than not doing anything. But the more you customize it to get them to understand why this message is important to you, why this issue is important to you, the more that they take away from that, and the more likely they've said it is to impact their decision one way or the other. So I would always encourage you, whether it's a phone call, whether it's a visit, whether it's an email or a letter, just talk about why it matters to you specifically as a voter.
Thanks so much, Kimmy. Noel, was there anything that you wanted to add on to that?
Yeah,
or
just want to add to that there is paid staff to look at that email and answer that phone. So that's, you're going to get through. You're going to get through eventually, but, given the nature of your message, that's going to determine how effective it is. But just remember, just like it's their job to represent us, they have staff it's their job to make sure they're looking at emails and voice messages and such. So they're not as inaccessible as one would think. So just back to the point about cutting through the noise.
That's true.
And one more question, or actually possibly a couple more, but I realize we have a few more minutes and want to stick to time. Could you talk about how the advocacy team collaborates or works with area organizations to amplify messages to state and local lawmakers? For example, organizations focus on a variety of social detriments of health.
It's a great question. We actually, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was down in Columbus as part of a collaborative group of health and human service nonprofits from the Cleveland area. So groups like United Way, Enterprise, who works on housing issues, the Lutheran Metropolitan Ministry, which is one of our really great partners, and they work on issues around housing. They operate the largest homeless shelter in the state of Ohio. So we all went down together. There were about 30 of us from all different health and human service groups across Northeast Ohio. We all went down to Columbus and had meetings with our elected officials at the State House. So we all keep in very close contact. I probably meet with them a few times a month so that we can make sure that we're elevating issues even beyond food, as someone mentioned. So around issues of housing, we stay up to date on housing legislation. Housing is really complicated, so we try, but it just so happens that there are a lot of experts in Cleveland who kind of give us an idea of what the issue is. And what our job as the advocacy department here is to understand what the impact is on the people that are coming to our programs and what the impact is on food insecurity. And if we see an issue like housing, health is a really, really big piece of the puzzle. If we see an issue around health that impacts food insecurity, then we're a lot more likely to stand up and advocate for or against a particular issue. So our job is to kind of hear from all of the experts in our area, collaborate with them, meet in DC, meet in Columbus with them, and just kind of determine what our stance as a food bank is. It all comes back to food insecurity for us, understanding what is the impact on someone's food security status. And that kind of guides all of our advocacy work. But Kristen, as you mentioned, there's so many root causes of hunger. So we know that if we really want to shorten the line at our food pantries, at our anti-hunger programs, that means talking about things like housing and healthcare and employment.
And I promised that we would bring it back up, and folks are fired up of wanting to make change. Would you mind sharing a little bit of just, if you were to give kind of calls to actions to folks, whether it's, our super advocates or signing up for emails, would you just dive a little bit into that as well? And I realize we have about 2 minutes, so as quickly as you can, and we'll be sure to include it in the email follow-up to folks as well.
Sure. So I'd say the number one thing, make sure you're signed up for our emails, for our action alerts. Noel and I put those out on a pretty regular basis with help from quite a few folks on our amazing development team. If you sign up for those emails, we keep you updated on what issues are coming up. We keep you updated on what you can do to make a difference, what pieces of legislation are out, and what kind of talking points and messaging you can do. Right now, the biggest opportunity is around our kids' meal programs. There's a really big opportunity in Congress. There's a number of bills that have been introduced, bipartisan legislation that's been introduced to extend some of these child nutrition waivers that Noel talked about. So we'll keep you updated on that as opportunities pop up. So make sure you're signed up for our emails. The other thing I would say to do, we're right now in the process of starting and at very early stages of starting a group of folks who are really engaged advocates who want to get more involved, who want to stay up to date on all of these issues beyond just getting an email on maybe a monthly basis. So folks who are really interested in getting into the weeds. So if you're interested in becoming a volunteer for a group like that, almost an ambassador, we would love to talk with you more about that and kind of build you into our plan starting at the ground level. So feel free to reach out to Noel or myself. Kristen and everyone has our contact info, so that can be shared as well. So I would say, if you want to know surface level and you want to stay involved and up to date, sign up for our emails. If you want to just really dive into this and you love talking about advocacy and policy work, then let us know so we can get you on the ground level for our super advocates group.
Kimmy, Noel, thank you so much. I realize that I probably have 30 seconds. So just to stay on time, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone that is on the call with us. We have some very regular, familiar faces, and you have no idea how much it means to us when we see your name pop up every single month or every other month for these Food for Thought Pluses, just because this is what we really think of just showing you how we're putting your generosity to good use. So hopefully you continue to you've all learned something, I'm sure, from Kimmy and Noel. I always learn something from them every single time I talk to them. Hopefully some of you may be interested in getting a little bit more involved, whether it's through those emails or possibly helping to become an ambassador and really help molding that program. So that will definitely be coming out from an email that Kate Domingo, who has been the person behind the scenes, will be sending to you all as well. Also, just want to give a shout out to Carrie and Ben, who are over in the community room with the folks that are in person. Thank you so much for entertaining and just being the host and hostesses with the mostest. Also, just a quick plug, our Food for Thought Plus next month will be on Thursday, May 19th with Tiffany Scruggs, and she's going to be talking about our help center, which Kimmy and Noel had spoke very briefly about as well. And with that, again, Kimmy, Noel, I learned something from you every single time I talk to you, and I just want to thank you so much. I mean, both of you are going on a decade and a half of being in this work, and your passion just shines through, and we are just so lucky to you, the food bank as well as our community. So thank you so much for everything that you guys do. It just means the world to us.
You're welcome.
Thanks so
Glad
much.
to do it.
Everyone.
Thanks so much, everybody. With that, we will look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good one.